Welcome, viewers. My name is Mary Dyer, and I'm a Financial Education Officer at the Finance Authority of Maine, also known as FAME. Joining me today is Mary Beth Bolts, author of Those Shoes, as well as Leslie Jones, Youth Financial Education Analyst from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also known as the CFPB. Also joining me is my colleague Eva Giles, who is FAME's College Savings Program Manager and a former adult educator. All of my guests today, including myself, are also parents, so we're very excited to bring you information about Invest in Me Reads, a new statewide initiative created to support your family's financial education and to help you use children's literature as a way to teach themes such as future goals, savings, and the value of choice. Developed by FAME and the Maine Office of Securities with support from the CFPB, Invest in Me Reads was designed to support you as you build your child's financial knowledge and skills. Children learn about money and making choices from the adults in their lives, which makes you the most important influence in helping your child to develop future financial concepts. To kick off the inaugural year of Invest in Me Reads, we have delivered a supply of Those Shoes to all Maine elementary schools to distribute to their second grade students and teachers. We hope that you are joining us today because the second grader in your life received a copy of the book and the materials. But if not, we're glad that you're joining us for this important conversation. During the next 20 minutes or so, we would like to provide you with some additional tips and strategies to engage your child in early lessons about money. So with that, let's begin. I'm going to start with Mary Beth. And again, thank you so much, Mary Beth, for being here with us. One way that we believe that families can engage their child is to encourage them to think about examples of when they wanted to buy a really special toy, shoes, or another item. I was hoping that you might tell us a little bit about the background of Those Shoes and what inspired you to write it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mary. I'm just thrilled to be a part of this wonderful program. Those Shoes was developed through a series of about 3 snapshots, memory-wise. And I'll start with the first one. When I was in 6th grade, I wanted these shoes right here. They were made by Adidas. They were from a show, Starsky and Hutch, and all of the kids in my class were getting them, both boys and girls. And I grew up in a big family where money was really tight, and my parents had money for the things that we really needed, but not the things we necessarily wanted. And so I remember the feeling of being left out and wanting to fit in really badly. And I kind of carried that memory with me into adulthood until I was going to college, and the second snapshot happened. I was in the education program, and I was supposed to go to a 4th grade classroom and just observe what was going on. And so I'm sitting in the back of the classroom, and there was a boy in the class who went outside to play at recess and came in with his shoes completely, they had just fallen apart. And the teacher said, well, why don't you go to Mr. Alfrey, the guidance counselor, and see if he has a pair of shoes you can wear. So the boy went to the guidance counselor, came back in wearing a pair of dressy black slide-on shoes, loafers, and all the kids laughed at him. And I just remember his crestfallen face, and I remember that feeling from when I was in 6th grade, wanting to fit in, feeling a little bit left out, and feeling different from everybody else. So then I carried that with me, and the last thing happened. I was just starting to write for children, and I was volunteering at a school that had lots of children with lots of needs, and we developed a clothes closet. And there was a little boy who came to school wearing a pair of water shoes as shoes, and they were about 2 sizes too small. And he came up to the clothes closet, and we were able to find a brand new pair of sneakers in exactly his size. And just the way he carried himself out of that clothes closet with these brand new shoes just made me want to write about it. And so that's how I came up with the idea for Those Shoes.
That's great, Mary Beth. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I think that's a great tip for families as a way to begin these conversations is to think about a time in your life when perhaps the parent or family member had a similar experience. So thank you for sharing that. Now, my next question is for Leslie. We encourage families to review the family reading guide, which I'm showing here, before sharing the book with their child. I wondered if you might share some of the tips that are highlighted in the guide for things to do or things to talk about before reading those shoes.
Well, the guide can help you spot key points in the story that you should discuss. So it makes it easier as you're reading later because you'll recognize what's getting ready to happen ahead of time. And it also guides the key financial literacy ideas. So as something's coming up, you'll have it flagged for you ahead of time. And it offers things that you can talk about before you read the story, while you read the story, and then after you read the story. And one of my favorite sections is extension activities that you can do after your child and you have read the story together, some suggestions of what you can do to extend that learning.
Great, thank you so much. I think it's a great tool for educators as well. So I think families, other mentors, parents, and other educators can use the guide. So I think that's very helpful. So my next question is for Eva. Thank you for joining us, Eva. So as a parent and an adult educator, I'd love for you to talk about the value of children's literature and your experience with using children's literature to teach important life lessons.
Thanks, Mary. I think as parents, we all know the value of that time that we set aside to have stories. It really gives us a commitment to listen and to talk with our children. One of the values that actually Leslie just talked about is the ability to not only hear the story, but to see the pictures and then have those after activities. So brain research tells us we learn best when we're actually using all of those modalities. And what better? Children's stories. You're seeing, you're hearing, you're doing. Another value I found as a parent is really using characters to help me help my child think about maybe more abstract concepts. Children at this age really are still very focused in the concrete and what they're doing themselves day by day. But when we have a story and we have a character that's actually able to show us what happens, what the outcomes are, and it's not required that a child experience it themselves, it really gives them an opportunity to see some of those outcomes and to develop some of the language to talk about some of these abstract concepts. So again, a perfect example is the concept of time. We talk to kids about, well, what do you want to do in the future? Well, for my kids in grade 2, the future may be lunch or recess. And frequently we're talking about things that are 4 or 5 years out. So using our characters almost as an extended peer group to test out the waters and to see what the outcome of some of these activities are. I think another fantastic way we're able to use stories is to really help kids think about problem solving. A lot of the concepts that are talked about, the characters are having to identify what the issues are, what some options they can choose, and then see the outcome of those options. Again, gives us the opportunity to have that platform to discuss these without the child having to experience them themselves. So children's literature is a fantastic teaching tool and really is a tool that we use as an adult and throughout our entire life.
That's great, Eva. Thank you so much. So I have another question for Mary Beth. In the story, Jeremy's grandmother talks about wants versus needs. And I'm wondering if you might share some ways that an adult or a caregiver might teach this concept to a child.
One thing that has struck me as I visit with kids all over the country is how early they get this concept. I have talked to preschoolers about wants and needs, and surprisingly, they get this. I don't know how, but they understand it. I would say as young as 4 years old, they can talk about this. But what I notice is if I just give, if I say, what are wants, what are needs, children usually say, wants are the things that we would like to have, but we can do without, and needs are the things that we need to live. So they will quickly list, we need food, we need shelter, we need water, we need a home, those kinds of things. And then you say, okay, now what are wants? And then they will quickly, that list gets very long, very quickly, because they all have these things that they want. And one differentiation that I've talked to kids about is that our needs tend to stay the same. You know, they're kind of the same day in, day out, whereas our wants are fickle and they change a lot. And what we want one day might not be what we want the next day or even an hour later. So that's one way they can tell the difference between the two. And a really fun, easy activity for those that are at home doing these kinds of things. You can go through your house, have your children determine what are wants and needs within your house, so they can gather items that are wants, gather items that are needs, talk about the difference between the two, and then also talk about a time. I think it's important for children to start to unpack what it means to delay gratification, to save for an item, to pine for it longer than, you know, the immediate I want that, and to determine a plan if that want continues, determine a plan to achieve getting that thing. And one more concept in the book that has to do with wants and needs is the difference between the things that make us happy and the things that make us deep down happy. So I talk to kids a lot about what things make you deep down happy. And in the story, Jeremy shares his shoes with Antonio, and I believe that even though it's hard for him to do so, he has this sense of deep down happiness. And that deep down happiness comes from doing the right thing more than owning a pair of shoes. So I'm really impressed by kids' ability to operate in that nuance and to understand these concepts.
That's great. Thank you so much. I love the idea of the activity of collecting items in the house that represent wants versus needs. I think that makes it really tangible rather than this abstract concept. So my next question is for Leslie. The guide includes a wonderful section of something to talk about. I really love how all of the content in the guide is really sort of categorized, things to think about, things to talk about. I wondered if perhaps you could share some of the conversation starters or activities that you might recommend.
I would like to build on what Mary Beth has said. Two stand out to me. One is discussing with your child the statement, Grandma says there's no room for want, there's only room for need. What do you think she means? And that definitely goes to that let's have that conversation about wants and needs. And I think following with the activity that you suggested about let's look at the items that we have in our home and categorize them is a great idea. And the second one that stands out to me is the statement that Grandma says, Grandma saved money for Jeremy's new boots. Have you ever saved money to buy something? How do you save money? And I think that's a great time to have a conversation about not only how we save money, but what other options might be that the child isn't thinking about, that maybe we only save at home right now, but maybe we could go get a bank account and start earning interest and things like that. And the ways that I save, what are more secure than others, things like that are some great extension ways to go once you start that conversation. So those are two of the ones that stand out to me, but there's probably 5 or 6 others that somebody can use as a conversation starter.
That's great. Thank you so much. So this one is for Eva. The guide also has a section of activities that lists something to do once you've read the book. So as a parent, I'm wondering what activities or conversations do you think were most effective in impacting your own children's financial behavior as adults?
Well, Mary, I'm actually at the point where my kids are now in their 20s. And we did have that set story time. So I think one of the things that's been nice to see kind of last with them through adulthood is that joy of reading. They both read very differently, have different genres that they're interested in, but both of them use reading on a daily basis. And I think that really established when they were young. We also did the same thing with math. And a lot of the concepts that both Leslie and Mary Beth have talked about, we help to reinforce by playing games and having kids become, more comfortable using numbers. Everything from, go fish and counting your jump rope to playing hopscotch just made the kids much more comfortable in having numbers around them as well as words. I think a skill that we are seeing really come into its own now that they're in their 20s is becoming very comfortable in understanding the true costs of things. Some of the conversations that Leslie and Mary Beth have talked about really, again, can be reinforced by just having the whole family go to the grocery store and participating and picking out what the items are going to be and talking about the actual costs of things so that they become much more aware of what purchasing power really is all about. I think the last piece that I would say is we also took advantage of all of the free and very low cost opportunities in our schools and in our community to expose our kids to different careers. Whether it was scouting or church group or different school activities, even walking around college campuses and taking advantage of the public opportunities that they have there. It really allows kids to think about what life can be in the future and get an opportunity to be exposed to many, many different careers and many, many different choices. And I think that's a value that every kid I've seen who's taken advantage of those really has a long-term impact from.
That's great. Thank you so much, Eva. I too have a college age student or adult now. So it is those early lessons. We're really at a point now where we get to see how some of those have played out and how some of the financial behaviors, you can sort of see and look back to where those sort of began and the foundation of that. So my next question is for Leslie, and we're so very grateful for the CFPB and this partnership. One of the things I want families to know is that Those Shoes is just one of the books in the CFPB Money on the Bookshelf series. And so I want to just point out that on the back of the parent guide, and I know you probably can't see that all that well in the video today, but there is a list of the other books that are included in the Money on the Bookshelf series. So I was hoping, Leslie, if families would like to share more of the books that teach financial concepts, where might they turn for some free resources?
Well, certainly to access more of the books, going to your search engine and typing Money as You Grow, and then selecting that will give you the list of the rest of the books. And from there, there's a list of other sites that you can go to that have additional things that might be interesting, but there are 21 books there. So I think that if you do, like Ava said, and you enjoy reading time with your kids, there are definitely some other stories and conversation starters to have. But I think that Those Shoes is a particularly core one. The message is universal and is for everyone, and that is why it is one of my favorite books. So.
That's great. And we encourage families, if they don't have a copy of the book or the books in the parent guide, perhaps checking with the school library or the community library. One of the things that's been so lovely to hear from some of the educators is that they too love this book, and I'm certain that many of the other titles might be available at the local library or at the school. So that's one tip as well to keep in mind. The other thing, Leslie, I was hoping you might speak about is the CFPB also has a tremendous number of other resources for adults to help support financial wellness, not only family financial wellness or youth financial wellness, but also adult financial literacy. I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the other resources that the CFPB has made available to adults.
Well, we cover a variety of topics, so I certainly recommend stopping by. We have a tool called Ask CFPB that has almost 1,000 answers to commonly asked questions about various money topics. But one of the things that I know affects so many of our lives, whether we're planning for our children or whether we've experienced college ourselves, is the whole student loan, saving for it, paying for it, and how do I manage my student loan. So we've definitely got a lot of resources for that. And again, Ask CFPB is just a great source for really easily understood answers to so many different kind of questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much. So the last question, I'm going to actually answer this one myself, and then I'm going to toss it over to Eva to give me her feedback. Obviously, families who've come to this video today have likely joined us through the Invest in Me Reads website, which is the new educational website that we've launched as part of this program. The Invest in Me Reads website, as you may have already seen, includes a whole bunch of fun activities and resources. And you know, one of the things that I want Eva to share, but like I said, I'm going to answer it first, is when visiting the website, where should families begin and what are some of the favorite activities? So one of the things that you'll notice when you visit the Invest in Me website is that things are categorized by information and resources for kids, activities and fun things that you can do with your child, and then some resources for adults. So I would really sort of encourage you to start there and take a look at some of the activities to figure out what might be most applicable to your situation. I think in terms of the activity I might recommend, of course, I can't help but recommend some of FAME's resources. And so one of my most favorites on the site is the Cash and Max coloring book series. Basically, Cash and Max feature two characters. We sort of think of them as our financial education ambassadors, if you will. Max is a little pug dog, so he's super cute. And there's a series, there's 20 coloring book pages that can be downloaded and printed and shared with children. And they really involve a lot of those topics around education, future careers, and financial wellness. So I encourage you to use those. Eva, any resource in particular or suggestion related to the site that you might want to share today as we conclude?
Sure, Mary. And as you've noted, there's a number of really fantastic resources there, but one that I think would be applicable to a lot of Maine families that's in the adult section is myalphongrant.org. The Alphon Scholarship Foundation has been providing grant dollars to children born as Maine residents since 2013. And now they've developed a full website that really helps families think about how to plan to use those resources in the future. So if folks haven't had an opportunity to go visit myalphongrant.org, there is a link right there on the Invest in Me webpage, and definitely look at developing my plan and helping to tap into some of the other resources that are on their site that can also be used for the kiddos.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time and expertise today. This has been wonderful, and I love all of the great ideas and tips and resources that you've shared. I also want to thank the families that have joined us for this video. Thank you for coming to the site, and thank you for all you're doing to strengthen your child's financial knowledge and skills. It's such an important aspect for their future, and so we really, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you all so much.